Hello from the Upper West Side in Manhattan. This is Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness, and you're listening to On Your Feet. Today's episode is about warming up before you head out. Last week we talked a little bit about posture and about your foot strike and about your breathing. And today I am simply going to take you through a couple of thoughts regarding how to prepare for an experience on your feet, whether it is a walk, a run, a sprint, or even a cycle, of course a hike. You want to make sure that your body is prepared for the movement that you're about to endure. And one of the main reasons why the warm-up is so important is because the blood flow that is being sent down into your lower extremities is not flowing adequately when you first come out of that sedentary position. So whether you are getting up and going for a walk or a jog or a cycle or a hike or whatever right in the morning, or you get off of work and you run into some sort of a fitness setting for some cardio or whatever, you're basically going from a super sedentary position, which makes all of the circulation in your lower extremities and your soft tissues in a static kind of sort of sense of stasis, to really needing that fresh oxygenated blood in order to move you through your experience properly. And the reason I say properly and put emphasis on it is because when you don't move through whatever your foot experiences are, whatever you're moving around doing, you tend to have issues with your gait. We talked last week about foot strike, where your gait, sort of the position of your hips, your use of your lower tummy muscles and back, the way that you plant your legs, you move, exchange the concentration of your energy from your left foot to your right foot and on up through the kinetic chain. You also have the tendency to, or you do have the tendency to put more pressure on your dominant side, which means that if you are right-handed, you probably have a stronger right leg than your left. And if you are left-handed, well, actually left-handed people, and I'm one of them, it's going to be a little bit different because we left-handed people were taught to do a lot of things that right-handed people do. At In Shape Fitness, we actually term this functional priority pivoting. And I write about it in my book called Darwin on the Treadmill, which is a chronicle of different stories and components of exercise functional fitness without the use of equipment and without exercise, willful exercise at least, in the gym setting. And one of the things that is always omnipresent in my client sessions here in New York City, where I see people up and down the Upper West Side, Upper East Side, and through Central Park, is that right-handed people, and of course it's 90% or so of the population is right-handed, tend to have a pretty weak left leg. So thank you for honking your horn, New Yorker. If you are wanting to take advantage of podcasts like this and other opportunities through apps or whatever to get out and enjoy the outdoors while you develop a sustainable fitness life, you're going to be on your feet. And what you want to do is warm up in order to make sure that your weaker leg is developing the strength it needs to endure the experiences that are going to make your life great. So, what do you do for that warm up? Now, here's where there are lots of different ways to warm up your body. But, one of the tried and sort of old school things that I used to see in the beginning of my fitness career was people would, go hit the gym and go into the gym, and the first thing they did was get on a cardio machine, and that was the warm-up. And then they did this sort of weightlifting thing, and that could not be farther from the sort of optimal way to dynamically warm up your lower extremities. I like starting on the floor. I tend to get people into cat-camel, sort of start with the evolution of mammalian biology here, where you get down on the floor and you start with a couple of cat-camels. So you start by orienting the body on your hands and your knees, where your hands and your shoulders line up vertically. Feel free to do this right now, by the way. I'm in Riverside Park on 91st Street near the Joan of Arc statue in Riverside Park. And I am not going to drop down to my knees right now because I'm standing in the dirt, but if you drop down to your hands and knees and then you drop your head like a bowling ball and round up your spine like a scared cat, that is a really beautiful and very pleasurable way to stretch out the spine, concave the spine, and take a deep breath as you do that, of course. Inhale through your nose, as I talked about last week, that really important, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. Smell the air. Take all the air in you can through your nose and smell, in New York it's surprisingly fresh. A city bus just drove by me, so I smell a little diesel fuel, but it is quite fresh, and I love coming out into the parks and just smelling the fresh air, whether it's the cut grass or, the garbage or whatever. So you smell the air in and you bellow. Use your diaphragm to bellow all the carbon dioxide waste out of your lungs through your mouth. So a couple of cat camels. Now the cat goes to the camel where you invert, lift your head and your chest and contract the lower back muscles and then lift your head and your chest up. That's the camel part of the cat camel. So that I always have people try, and that's a successful attempt to stretch out the back, which is really, really helpful in terms of juicing up your core muscles a little bit. Now let's really juice up the core muscles, because the next thing that I like to have people do before they do anything else is drop into those great isometric contractions that are the plank. Now the plank we talked about, and I talk about incessantly actually. We've talked about it in some of the other podcast programs that we do, where the significance of the plank, because of the number of contractions, because the automatic effort that you can't even control when you are in the plank position itself, where your shoulders and your elbows line up, your hands are flat on the floor, and then you are levitating using the balls of your feet and your toes to rest your body in that position. Hold the position stable and still. And if you can't hold it for 30 seconds on your toes, you drop to your knees and you hold it on your knees. That is a regulation plank. It just shortens the lever, so it makes it a little bit easier, but it is still contracting all those layers of muscle in and around your rib cage, the intercostal muscles that connect your ribs together, the transverse abdominis that wraps the rib cage and protects your vital organs, and then of course the obliques, your front muscle, your back muscle, all of which as a team, right? And this is the key to it, as a functional team, those layers of muscle work together to protect the most important parts of your body, your vital organs. And so the plank is really effective because it forces extra air and fluids and fat out of that space that resides or can develop and reside within those layers of muscle and in the peritoneum, the body cavity. So you hold the plank and then sit in child's pose. Take a couple of seconds to stretch out the back, because you inevitably, if you don't have really strong tummy muscles, you're going to be supporting yourself with your back. Let's see, how are we doing on time here? We're coming up on 9 minutes, and we've really only stretched out a couple of muscles so far, but we're having some fun. And in just a couple of minutes, we're going to get moving a little bit more. But before we do that, what I want you to stretch out a last time is your back one more time, your shoulders a little bit, and the back of your legs in downward facing dog. Now, downward facing dog is also called a pike position, and that means that your body makes a triangle with the floor. So your hands are on the floor, your butt is in the air. And the really beneficial part of this exercise, of course, is that you're stretching out the hamstrings and the calves, which are always tight if you sit at a desk all day or in a chair, or, if you sit a lot. So taking a couple of deep breaths in downward facing dog is really fabulous. Now, I personally perform every single morning, something called the 5 Tibetans. And the 5 Tibetans include 21 repetitions of 5 exercises. And that's it. Now, I tend to do a few other things, and I have lots of other exercises in my life, of course, but those 5 exercises, one of those 5 exercises is something I call the dynamic dog, which is downward facing dog to upward facing dog. A lot of people don't perform the upward facing dog very easily or without sort of some stress and anxiety over it, really, because contracting the lower body to such an extent that your legs, your thighs are straight and just off of the floor, and the pressure is really on your wrists and your hands. So if you choose to think about doing that and try it, be very gentle and just try 1 or 2 of them. The 5 Tibetans are really cool because you do everything 21 times, and it goes back to the significance of 7 in the beginning, 7 in the middle, 7 at the end, has something to do with the spirituality of Tibetan monks. And I don't really get into that, but I have found that the 5 exercises 21 times is something that I know I personally can do every single day, and so that's what I do in my apartment in Manhattan, in Harlem, where I live. So now we've done a cat-camel. We've taken a few seconds to activate, juice up those tummy muscles and your back, and then we've stretched out a little bit the back of the leg. I want you to now turn your body over. Hopefully you're doing all of these exercises, and if you're out moving around and you're not and you're just listening, that's fine too. But these are really simple ways. You don't always need my voice, just a couple of things. It doesn't have to be fancy, but if you do develop the motivation to get out, again, warming up, doing a few of these exercises before you head out, taking 10, 15 minutes. I'm aiming to get finished with this exercise routine and this podcast in 8 minutes, because I actually am having to finish up my sessions for the day because my daughter gets out of school. So we're going to now be in hip bridge position, which means that your knees are bent and your feet are flat on the floor. And this may seem like a really small deal, but the nuances of your foot placement and whether or not your toes are gripping the floor actually make a huge difference to the activation of certain muscles in this exercise. When you lift your hips up into the air, right? So your hands are beside your body, your back is flat, shoulders are back, and your palms are down, and then your hips are up in the air. That fully extends your hip flexors, which is the key to this. Hip flexors and your butt muscles and your lower back and core are really important ambulatory muscles. Everybody thinks about it as far as the legs, but the lower part of your core is the driver for all of your kinetic energy. It's also the center of your gravity. So you want to make sure that the soft tissues and your muscles are freshly oxygenated and lubricated and exercised every single day. So hip bridge is great. You just want to keep your feet flat. You want to keep your toes and heels lined up. Now you just hang out here in this position. It's really comfortable and very good for you, because if you lift up your heels, for example, you'll feel a little more contraction, a little more substantial contraction down the back of the leg. You'll feel your hamstrings engage a little bit more. And if you're fairly strong, you can also lift up one leg and try to just in your own head gain some level of understanding how your right leg might differ from your left leg in terms of its strength. The thing that I normally do, the thing I'd like to do with our clients, is to take a tape measure and actually measure the quad, measure the thigh muscles, measure the calf muscles, which is, sort of quantifiable proof of the difference in strength. But you can do pretty much any exercise that requires one leg, which again goes back to that term pivoting, where we define willful exercises in terms of our efforts with clients to pinpoint or to isolate one leg for the primary moving exercise. So exercises like lunges, one-legged stands, single leg squats, and in this case, the single leg hip bridge is really, really beneficial to that level of awareness. And then, of course, it's also really beneficial to the strength of the hip flexor on the stable leg, and the hamstring and the back of the butt, the back of the leg. So what's next? Now, just to go through it again, because I like doing this, make sure that you know we've got the cat camel and the plank. And then we had a downward facing dog and a child's pose, or a child's pose, then a downward facing dog. And now we've done a hip bridge. You don't need to do any crunches before you go for a run, but you do need now to stand up. I've got a couple of minutes left with you, and I simply want to have you do a couple of things. One is a postural systems check, which we did last week when we talked about posture and the plumb line, which is that invisible line running down your body on the side from the top of your head down through your ears and your shoulders, your hip muscles or your hip bone and your knees and then your ankles. But take just a couple of seconds to think about that and then to use that deep breathing technique that I've been talking with you about to think about isometric contractions through your tummy muscles and your butt to raise your awareness of where your body is in space. That's called proprioception. A lot of fancy words in fitness, isn't there? And it's really, really beneficial for you to just start out having taken the few sort of meditative minutes to prepare yourself for this endeavor. The last thing are some lunges. All right, we want to do lunges because we want to make sure that you interact with gravity a little bit. That builds a sense of cardiovascular activity, which sends fresh oxygenated blood out to your body. As your heart beats, you're actually pumping fresh blood down through your core and obviously through your arms and your legs. And here's an interesting fact. So you know how the oxygenated blood is exchanged through the capillaries. It isn't exchanged in any other place. It's the cellular respiration takes place at the capillary level. And the thing about your capillaries is that your circulatory system doesn't send a consistent, like an active blood flow to these teeny tiny capillaries all the time. It's like a faucet being turned on or turned off. You know you can rely on the water coming out of your faucet when you turn it on. You can rely on the capillaries having freshly oxygenated blood when you start moving. But if you just get up and go, that exchange of freshly oxygenated blood coupled with the pulling out of the carbon dioxide that's already in your body, that sort of equilibrium that needs to develop within your body, that is starting to happen when you start moving. You haven't achieved it yet. So by lunging, you activate your elevated heart rate a little bit, and then you're able to benefit more from the activity that you're about to begin. So how do you do a lunge? This is hard if you have knee issues. Lunges can be quite difficult. So take good care that you have either held on to something by your body, either the back of the chair or a wall, or you don't go all the way into the lunge. But you do want to make sure that you keep your feet forward. When you take a big step forward with your right leg, for example, you take a big step forward, hopefully both feet are still flat on the floor, and then you bend both knees to 90 degrees. That's a right angle. By the way, things are getting a little bit louder as I'm walking now because I have to head to Broadway and over to my daughter's public school in New York City. It's just getting a little bit louder. But let's just talk through the end of the lunge. You press off of the rear ball of the foot and your toes and the rear foot to come back up into the position if you're going to do a moving lunge. If you're not going to do a moving lunge, you want to do a static one, you can press off of the forward foot and reverse directions to go back to your standing position. Now, there are so many different ways to do lunges. Just make sure that you're being really super careful. And if you are interested in getting a little more feedback or instruction on the specific mechanics, let me know. You can certainly give a shout to me at InShape Fitness, bodybyInShape.com, or you can send me an email at kim@inshapellc.com. I'm happy to set you up with a list of things to do and or a couple of tips on how you can get started. Have a great day. I will see you again soon.